right. So welcome to the Illuminate Solstice Soiree. We got Lou coming back in here. Here we go. Who we are, I wanted to start by introducing myself. I am Marisela Aceves Wexler, pronouns she, her. I am the Illuminate Community Coordinator and Admin Whiz for the network. And it is a pleasure to be here calling in from Wiyot Land, today known as Arcata, California, which is on the northwest coast of the state of California. And I am going to welcome Lou to introduce himself. Welcome back, Lou.
Hey, y'all. Good evening, at least from where I am at. Had some technical issues, and so I hope that gives you permission, gives you allowance to know that even if you've been on Zoom 656,000 times, you're always you might be in for a treat, right? So my name is Luis Alejandro Tapia. My friends call me Lou, and I serve as the network doula for the Illuminate Network. I'm an Aries, Scorpio, Gemini. I'm usually all about the spring, but the way that climate change has shifted the way that spring feels for me, I'm reconsidering which one is my favorite season. So I'll have to kind of go through the rest of the cycles to give you an answer back to that. That's me for now.
Thanks, Lou. Appreciate it. So as we get started, and we're gonna have more time to connect with each other, meet each other, talk with one another. Looks like we've got a nice, sweet group today. So that's gonna be really good for us to have a time to connect. I wanted to go over our session flow so you know where we're headed together today and what we are up to. So we're gonna start with a little bit of context for who is Illuminate, some of the current projects that we want to highlight right now, give you a little context there. We're going to come into the space together with some meditation and grounding, so we can come in with some intention and breath. We will have an opportunity to connect in breakout rooms, learn a little bit about why we're here and what we're up to. Then we will hear some of the learning weaving themes, so things from the overarching network that are emerging and that we're noticing and learning so far with the network. That's going to inspire our fishbowl conversation, where we are hearing from some of the folks who are involved as like core members of the network, who are going to be reflecting and discussing some of these emerging themes. And that's also going to be a time where you all can come into conversation together, and we'll let you know how to do that at that time. And we're going to head to close with a final breakout, where we get to reflect together about what we're learning, and finish out with some announcements and reminders, and then a celebration for this time and what we've accomplished together. All right, so who is Illuminate? We are a collaborative network that's designed to connect people and organizations committed to cultivating the field and practice of systems change towards a just, equitable, and regenerative future for all. We focus and emphasize our work and visions around learning, connection, and support. So we learn across different ways of knowing, being, and practicing systems change, and share what we're learning as we go. We're connecting people together who facilitate and train and fund systems change practice internationally. And we support experiments with financial resources and otherwise to help the field to expand, strengthen, and deepen. Some of the things that we're up to that make this and more possible, we've got our luminary cohort, the first cohort of its kind, and we've got some folks representing that cohort here today that we're going to get to chat with. We're 6 months in. This is a group, a learning community of systems leaders and practitioners who are from around the world that are pursuing inquiries about the edges of the field of systems change practice And they're going to be sharing about this work through a variety of digital offerings over the next 6 months. So keep an eye out. Also wanted to uplift our bridging cohort. It's in their 2nd year of work. This group pays attention to the work of bridging from and between leaders who are working from non-dominant spaces and communities, bridging across communities, power structures, and across existing systems. And they're currently working to produce insights from this cohort to share about what has come out of this journey that they've had together. So keep an eye out for that closer to the end of this year, beginning of 2023, somewhere in there most likely. We've got Bridgers here with us today as well. Also, keep an eye out for Clubhouse chats. This is a newish series that we're doing. The theme is at the edge of systems change at this time, and that's subject to change depending on where the energy goes. But these are live conversations with community members that you can join and participate in live. You can also access recordings and transcripts on our website. Last couple things we wanted to lift up today. We've got our Power and Justice webinar series. That will be coming out late summer or early fall. And this is a series focusing on international conversations about power in the systems change field and the role of equity and justice work in changing systems. So that's going to be really wonderful. We hope to see you there. Hope to be in conversation around those workshops that will be a part of those webinars as well. And then get your feedback and dig in with you more at those opportunities. Lastly, from me at this moment, we've got our funder node, which we're excited to share will be live and in action in the coming months. So if you're a funder or no funders who might be interested or who could benefit from a power, equity, and justice centered learning community digging into systems change, there's going to be information to share about this space that's going to be cultivated for peer learning, candid conversations, and support for funders. So all this and more coming soon. And that's just some of the great work that we are excited to share with you today. All right, Lou, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maricela. I'd love for folks to let me know where they are in the chat. You could just throw in the chat, where are you currently located? I want to see what places we're tuning in from. All right, Taiwan. I know we got some folks from, yes, Australia, Canada, Boriken, Quebec, yeah. My living room, yes, my partner, Crisades. Cape Town, South Africa. Welcome, Eric. Welcome, Brian. Crisades, Nathan, Fabian, Tatiana, Sam, Maricela. Also, welcome. I do want to do a special welcome to Fabian, one of our newest members of our stewardship group. Welcome. Just recently joined us, and I'm excited that you're here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for most folks here, there's a celebration happening today, right? Well, really for everyone. I guess the celebration on our end is that most of us are celebrating the summer solstice. Sam, I know you might be celebrating or not the winter solstice. And just kind of taking a moment to orient us a little bit, and then Tatiana will help further ground us around the meaning, the purpose of the summer solstice, right? Is that today we get to celebrate the longest day of the year, a day that has been believed to really hold the greatest energy, the greatest prosperity, the greatest vitality and strength. And this was a time where pagan rituals existed. Okay, my baby is agreeing. Yeah, it is. It has been a long day, longer than usual, right? And so this is a day that like pagan rituals were conducted to honor the sun gods, right? The divine light to honor the element of fire, which is why you see Maricela and I wearing like some pinkish, reddish, orange hues today. And this is a time that we would rejoice underneath the warmth of the sun, right? In that today, the sun was the strongest. And in that, so too was God or the gods. And so vibrationally, today is a portal that offers us some energy around our root chakra, our sacral chakras, our solar plexus chakras, right? And so we're here today to take advantage, to use, to benefit, to commune, to gather around that energy, right? And that this is a time for that where we can also cleanse all the things that we've done up to this point, and start to think about what are some new adventures that we want to engage in. And so welcome to this adventure. If you're new to Illuminate, I'm really excited to get to know you deeper, more, and I'm really excited that you're here. And so Tatiana, I'll pass it to you now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I'm just thinking about those who are in the winter solstice mode and the meaning, and for you, Sam, at this kind of the opposite end of this moment as well. So I just want to bring that in and maybe create some balance also here together. So welcome everyone. What a gift to be with you on this day, and grateful for your presence and joining us in this process of kind of connecting and deepening and weaving together our work and our hopes and purposes in the world. So I just want to just take a moment to help everyone land a little bit, knowing that it's early morning for you, Sam, and at the end of the day for others. We're in different time zones. Had to help us ground and arrive and set some intention together for this time. So let's begin with just some breathing together. So I'm just going to invite us into a guided meditation, and please feel free to adapt how you wish. If you don't like closing your eyes, I'll invite you to close your eyes to visualize. And if you can turn off your video if you like as well, feel free to do that. Okay, so if you can plant your feet on the ground, connected to the earth, and let's just start by breathing together, coming into presence, taking a few breaths. And as you do, just start to become aware of being in your body. You can scan, body scan, become aware of your heart. Take a breath into your heart center. Notice how that feels. You give your shoulders a roll and breathing into and noticing your back, breathing into your back. And just become aware of how you're feeling, paying attention to the senses, how you're feeling, what you're noticing. And feel your buttocks sinking into your chair. Breathing in, and feel your feet on the floor, connected to the earth. Now I'm going to invite us to do some just letting go breathing. So I'll guide you through it. It's 3 sets of 3. So we'll begin with what I'm going to ask you to do is just scan your body for a sensation around any tension that you might be holding. And as you pay attention to that, you're going to breathe in and you're going to hook on that tension. And as you exhale, you're going to let it ride out on the out breath. So you're going to breathe in, hook on that tension, and let it ride out on the out breath. So the first 3 breaths, we're going to focus on any mental tension you might be holding, any distraction, any mental stress or things you're thinking about. So this is just going to help us clear our beings for our time together. So locate that mental tension. And now you're going to breathe in and hook on the tension, and then on the out breath, let it ride out. And we'll do that 2 more times. Breathe into the mental tension. And exhale, let it ride out. And 1 more time, breathing in. And next, now do a scan for any physical tension or pain or ache you might be feeling. And we'll do the same thing. We'll locate that tension. And now let's breathe in. Let it go on the out breath. Breathing in. And 1 more time. Breathe in. And now the next 3 breaths, we're going to look at or identify any emotional tension we might be holding. So scan for that. Emotional stress or tension. And now we'll breathe in. Hook on the emotional tension and let it go. Breathing in. Again, breathing in. And now what I'd like you to do is just try to become aware and present around your heart. Notice your heart center. And reflecting on our day, this day today, and the solstice. And the spirit of what Lou shared with us. Let's just take a moment and reflect on any gratitude that you might be feeling for the life that is around you. Just focus on that and the gratitude that you have. And with that, staying centered in the heart from that place of gratitude and love. Let's generate together an intention for our time here, in our connection, in our coming together, a heartfelt intention. Breathe into that. And as you're breathing in, and as you generate that intention in your heart, just feel the Feel your energy around your heart just expanding. And connecting to the people here on this call together. And expand it out to the people close to you in your life. And expand it further to your community. Expanding even wider. To all the beings, to the earth. Just feel that expansion and connection. And then in the next breath, come back into your body, feeling your feet. Yeah, holding your heart still connected there. Take a breath. Acknowledging our gratitude, our intentions. And coming back to our circle here, we can open our eyes. Thank you, everyone. You can turn your video back on. Thanks, Lou. And thank you, Tito.
Thank you so much, Tatiana. So we're going to go into some quick breakout rooms. Yeah, I think we'll do maybe 3 of them. And inside of there, we're going to be introducing ourselves, of course. It'd be helpful to know each other's names, although it is written here inside of the boxes. It'll help us pronounce it the way that you want it to be pronounced. Let us know how you'd like to be addressed. And also the prompt. What system are you most trying to influence or shift from what to what? And so we'll do that for 6 minutes, and then we'll come right back. There we go.
Yeah.
Welcome back, welcome back. Yeah, so we won't share, one second. We won't share what you shared in your rooms at the moment. We want to keep that intimacy going. But what we do want to share and kind of set up the space for us to move into the next section of our offering today. And so I'll send it back to you, Tatiana.
All right, awesome, thank you. So what we're doing now is we're sharing in Illuminate. We're sharing some of the key learnings that we're seeing across all the work that Illuminate is doing. So I'm going to take 5 minutes just to give you the kind of high level, because this will help set us up and frame up the fishbowl conversations that we're going to jump into. And Lou, are you able to share, or Maricela, the deck in a minute? I'll just explain the background to this, and then I'll just walk us through the high level stuff. Is that okay, Maricela or Lou? You have stuff handy? Okay.
Absolutely. If you just let me know next.
I'll let you know when. Okay, cool. So just to say, I think everybody knows by now that everyone who's in this circle together, the work of Illuminate is very much rooted in learning across practice and across different contexts that we're working in practice. And as people who are working and leading in the field of systems change. And So learning is at the heart of, and learning, it's funny, I was thinking about that word. It's not, when you talk about learning, there's a lot, it can be, there's a lot of assumption around what we mean by that. And so for us, it's really rooted in learning across our experiences. So it's really rooted in, grounded in experience and context. And so with all the wonderful activities and work that people are doing in the cohorts and in some of the other project streams in Illuminate, what we have amongst the kind of the steward group of Illuminate, what we've tried to set out to do is to start to notice and weave together the learning across all the activities. And so moments like today are live versions of that, where we come together and we can have moments of connection and sharing. And I think through some of our activities, we'll continue to facilitate that learning across. Because I think each cohort or each project is doing deep learning and practice together. And then it's like, okay, what's happening across these cohorts? What can we see? And so, so we have a learning weaving group, and that's what we're calling it, learning weaving, that has been participating in and tracking the activities of Illuminate for the last several months. And what we've done is kind of pulled up some key patterns and themes that that we're seeing. And so this is the high level sharing of some of those lines. And for us, this moment today is an opportunity to kind of not weave, but knead like a bread, like some of these ideas together, and to see, what we see collectively when we center some of these lines. Okay, so that's the intention context behind this. And I'm just going to walk us through there's 4 kind of key themes that we're seeing. And of course, I don't think it's going to be any surprise, but the first one is around power. So lots and lots and lots of questions, reflections, interventions, around power. So in our location, in our practices, in our learning, in our strategies. So it cut across all of the work that we did, and it emerged in, multiple levels and dimensions of the learning that was happening in Illuminate. So some of those examples are and I would say just the question of integration around power, like how is this being integrated into systems work at all the levels. And then, key questions like who decides, who frames a systems change initiative or an issue even, or a systems intervention, who decides how it is resourced, lots and lots of questions around that, especially, there was work that we did inquiring and researching into funders and systems change, and the question of philanthropy and the power dynamics in philanthropy was really strong, and the question of like how this work is resourced. Big themes around naming the meta systems and ensuring that in our systems practice, like we are drawing the lines of colonization, of white supremacy, of ableism, of patriarchy, so that in the work, when we're talking about systems, there's these meta systems that are systems of inequity that are running through and bringing that kind of center into the work. And then really interesting also, especially in the bridging cohorts, interesting work around appropriating power as well in systems practice. So these are power, was the first one. And again, this is just high level kind of hits that we're sharing at this point. So the next slide. So also noticing field level. So I'm talking about the systems change field level shifts and instability. Obviously through COVID and climate change, things that seem stable are no longer stable, like the instability is kind of moving. There's also themes around navigating the unknown and what that means in the systems practice world. A lot of the big players in the systems change field are shifting, kind of thought leaders, funding leaders, shifts there, and disruptions also around that. And then kind of a question around mindset. So there's also been the trend where systems change has become a little like more mainstream in the change sector, and yet the kind of mindset, deep mindset shifts are not aligned necessarily with that practice. So questions around that. And then the next slide, a call to deepen practice. So this is also a really strong theme that we've seen across the work of Illuminate. So there's a call to deepen practice, centering the human, and decentering the human also, bringing and aligning and connecting healing and somatic practices, and a recognition that people are really tired and that the work is hard. So this is definitely like clear themes that we also saw. And then the next. And then the last key theme is kind of came through really loudly in the work of the bridging cohort, and specifically amongst certain folks who are asking questions around the relationship between the global South and the global North around systems change. And, a recognition of the field level kind of dominance from the global North and Western constructs in systems practice. And a real inquiry into like what happens when we center the global South in this conversation, which is happening in some of the inquiries that we're doing with the bridging cohort, which is really exciting. And I think there's just lots of potential and energy there. And that also thread came through in other work as well, in the luminary cohorts and in other work, but it most strongly through the bridging. So I just also want to nod and acknowledge Jorge, who is kind of leading in that. He's not with us tonight, but he'll be in he'll be there at the solstice gathering tomorrow. So this is the last theme. So there you go. This is some of the lines that we're seeing and weaving across, and want to bring out for us this evening and this morning in our conversation. And Lou's going to guide us in that conversation next. Thanks, Lou.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tatiana, for really laying out the context for us. And so what we're gonna do right now, we're gonna go into a fishbowl activity. I'm gonna spotlight some folks to begin with. But also I wanna make it very clear that this is a conversation for all of us, right? And so we'll start with a few folks. They'll introduce themselves. We'll start the conversation. And really at any point, you can either raise your hand, you can, send Tatiana or myself a message, and then we'll spotlight you too. I think at some point we won't need to do the spotlight when we've all shared and become part of the conversation. So I'm excited to get to that too, right? Let me see, I see something in the chat. Thank you. Oh, now I'm spotlighted. Thank you so much, Marisela. Right, so I'd also would like to bring Tito up here, Sam, and Tatiana. I'm gonna bring you up here. Thank you, Sam, for reminding us to hydrate. I need to do that too. All right, there we go. And so let's start this off here, right? My request is that when you start, like your first, I would say, dive into the fishbowl, please introduce yourself and the work that you're up to, right? I think maybe a way you could do that is maybe sharing what system you're most trying to influence, what you're up to in the world, and then continue sharing, right? And so these, I prepared some prompts, and really we're gonna follow the conversation, right? Given who we are, given the time that we have here, and given our experience as practitioners in this field called systems change. The first thing I want to start with are the limitations of systems, of the field of systems change, right? I'd like to have a conversation about where you're seeing the boundaries, where you're seeing the edges, where you're seeing the limits of the field, right? So where are you seeing the limits of the field of systems change? And what are the implications of those limits to your work? Let's start there.
You look like you had some thoughts, Tito. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'll take that invitation. So I'm Tito, I use he, him pronouns. I am an equity-centered facilitator, strategist, educator, and researcher, living and working at the intersection of anti-racism and emergent strategy. And I work primarily in the educational space, as well as nonprofits and philanthropy. But generally, I see myself as working with leaders, with organizations, institutions, network, who are on the front lines of social change, particularly speaking to educational inequity, anti-racism, and youth development and youth leadership. So I situate my work in those fields. And those are also the systems that I'm hoping to shift or transform. What else? What else are we responding to?
Yeah, for you, where are you seeing the limits of this field called systems change, and what are the implications of those limits to your work?
Yeah, what a easy question.
You know what? I took my blazer off. You want to? Are you ready to answer it, Tito?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start us off, at least jump in.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I come to systems change work again as someone who really spends a lot of my time focused on anti-racism, supporting organizations, networks, individuals to co-create pathways to grow equity in their spaces. And I think part of how I come to that work is very much grounded in a systemic analysis of the institutions within that I'm embedded in, or the networks that I'm working in. And so I come to that work, I think, with that frame. I think a limitation that I find going back to this idea around power and the ways that power is evoked and framed in system change, I find that how we think about systems is still very much, whether it's the language, the mental models we use, is still coming from a very white dominant framing in history. I think that the players that we see, the thought leaders in the field, are still predominantly white. And I think that it's a real limitation as we think about what it means to transform harmful systems. I think for me, one of the things that I really enjoy or appreciate about a system change framework or a lens is that, the more that we can better understand the behavior of a system, I think the more that we can anticipate that behavior or work within systems rather than, being controlled by them, in terms of shaping what they look like. And I think part of what the limitation is that our understandings of systems within systems change, and particularly thinking about, the dominant literature in this field, doesn't really account for the ways in which so many of the systems we speak to were not designed to serve Black, Indigenous people of color. And that's often missing from, I think, the framing of how we think about the different moving parts of these systems. And so for me, if we're really going to be interrogating systemic behavior and how that manifests, then there needs to be, I think, an honest conversation around what the design and intention was from the beginning of these systems, not only to isolate and ice out, but also to intentionally marginalize certain communities. And so if we are not, I think, engaging in systemic analysis from that starting point, then we have a systems change field that I would argue is very whitewashed. And although I think it borrows very heavily from indigenous wisdom, indigenous ways of being, that isn't always highlighted in the work. And so I think for me, it's really important to bring an anti-racist, a decolonial, an abolitionist frame to systems change work. And I think by abolitionist, I don't mean we need to abolish systems change as a field or as a theory, but rather thinking of abolition as an opportunity for new possibilities, for growth, right? For change, transformation within the field. And so what is no longer serving us? And how does that open up, right, possibilities for how we talk about systems, I think in more critical ways. So I see that as a real limitation. And I think happy to talk more about it later, but I think on the ground, what that often looks like are the leaders, the thought leaders, the change makers, the funders of this work, again, tend to be predominantly white, tend to be talking to one another, and I think often come to this work with a bias around race that they're often unaware of. And so in a lot of my work, particularly working with white leaders who do system change work, there is this kind of reckoning that needs to happen with, well, what does that mean for my leadership? How is whiteness showing up in how I approach this work? Whereas I think people of color often come to this work very much with an embedded systemic lens, given their positionality in the world. And I think that we need to invite that perspective, that voice into the work, but also I think acknowledge that so much of how we think about systems change is not something that was developed 15 years ago, right, by academics, but that there's a lineage to this work that, again, I think often is not named. And so for me, it also just means, I think, a recentering of even how we talk about the lineage of the ideas that we are drawing on, and also ways to make them more accessible. So I'll pause there.
Can I nudge you onto the stage as well, Tatiana?
You're the nudger. Sure. I can. I'll be nudged. I have yeah, it's a really interesting, it's a question. So, and I have a lot of different thoughts that are kind of flowing through. And I think, Tito, I would agree with everything that you've said. And so I come to systems change, and as I was saying, kind of in our introduction, which we didn't get to talk, from an intersectional feminist background in kind of activism and organizing. And so, you know, when I learned complexity theory, I was like over the moon, because it aligned with like what the work that I thought we were doing in the world, and also it also added to it in a way that was really exciting. But I think there are so I think when you ask the question, what are the limits, I also feel like, what are the possibilities? And the more, like, so to answer the question of where are the limits, I think the more the possibilities are further, there's something about centering outside of the dominant field to the possibilities, which looks like things like not doing this work in institutions and moving out of kind of like what is constructed around the NGO sector or like charity sector, trying to do this work. There's like more space there, I feel. There's more possibility around, there's life there. But I think in terms of limitations, you know, some of the key things that I see, you know, there's limitations around those who are doing this work and who are really under-resourced. And this links to a lot of the work I do around that intersects around gender and other issues. But for example, gender-based violence, where there's ecosystems that are working and they're so grossly underfunded and under-resourced. And so I think there's an opportunity to align that work and try to work towards more resources being there so that this work can be supported in an ecosystem way. So bring in like leverage, right? The complexity approaches with all the feminist approaches, but the resources, I think funding is really a key limit. And it's frustrating, I think, because what the limit I see is that there's kind of like, as there's a groundswell around systems change, it kind of stays in the dominant center, right? And so if it's in the dominant center, I think if it starts work from there, we'll always risk repeating the harms because it's within that kind of limited system. And so I think that's a limit, and which comes down to power and the structures around power, and then how I think there's limits in the sector. I think there's just huge limits in the charity sector, and the way in which that's constructed, and the way in which it also kind of self-perpetuates in the name of social change. So creating ways to have really honest conversations about those power dynamics and resources, and that, it's quite, I think, radical and important. So those are some thoughts. There may be a little all over the place, but just to throw into the mix around limits in the field. Yeah.
Sam, you gonna nudge me too, or is this where I nudge you?
Were you nudging me? Yeah, I barely heard you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He was nudging Sam.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I didn't hear you. So go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you both for your thoughts as well. Definitely lots of resonance in there for me. I guess where to start? There's never really a good place to start, but my background is sort of feels like it's always in motion. So having grown up in the UK and come to the Australia, New Zealand context is an interesting one. So obviously grappling with the shift from growing up in like quite a privileged middle class, that sort of UK, London area, and coming to a part of the world which is still reckoning with and grappling with the past and ongoing kind of systemic violence of the country I was born in, has definitely been a very in my face experience, which I think is really important to be alive to, being down here. So I think for me, the sort of the way I've come into this work has been being involved in sort of on the ground initiatives to begin with. So very much kind of getting involved in the environmental sector, being concerned about climate change, and getting into planting trees and, trying to repair soil and repair ecosystems. But I guess a story that I often tell is like this moment of being on my knees, planting Harakiki on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand, and realizing as fast as we could plant these trees, other people could chop them down. And so like going on that journey of trying to understand there's something bigger at play here, that there's other systems that are influencing the problem that I'm trying to work on, and thus trying to just slowly kind of, open myself up to and listen to all of those different aspects that are affecting those challenges. And for me, that was a big journey then of recognizing and listening to and honoring some of the indigenous knowledge and the indigenous ways of being and the indigenous practices that were very absent in my life before coming to this part of the world. I didn't see those sorts of patterns that I've had the profound privilege of then starting to learn about down here in New Zealand and in Australia. So I guess that's sort of been that journey of how I've come into it. And I think my perspective on systems has been deeply influenced by that time in the environmental space. So for me, all the systems and complexity stuff that I learned about was very, not obvious, but like it made a lot of sense to me because of observing ecology and seeing the relationships between trees and birds and flowers and pollinators and soil, and all the things that you can't see that are there. And so I think that lens has been really interesting to come into this work with as well. So I was trying to make some notes as to where some of those limitations that you mentioned. So so the system of influence, I guess the systems that I'm really interested in influencing is really our, I guess the shift from the sort of human-centric, anthropocentric to the more ecocentric cultures. So seeing ourselves as part of a living world, and like trying to break that savior complex, that leave the world kind of attitude that probably, I was probably very guilty of as I was trying to get out of the UK and trying to reorientate around care, and that being a responsibility, but also a privilege for us to be able to create the conditions conducive to life for other things, for other beings and the like. So that's a big part of how I'm trying to reorientate my work at the moment around regeneration and the likes. But some of those, the limitations, I think there's a big part of, being part of the system and being part of the problem and trying to find, my role and my relationship with within that, knowing my background and my history can be, seen as part of that challenge, and undoubtedly, trying to slowly do that sort of decolonization or just trying to do that work. But then I think one of the big things that I see is battling or kind of working around the simple stories about the complex world. We're very drawn into a simple story that makes simple sense to us and has a clear logic from A to B. Like, as humans, we seem to like those stories. And that is sort of like perpetuating this being trapped in very simple stories about how change happens, when actually we need those nuanced understandings right now, especially with the instability, especially with the change power dynamics and the likes of what's going on. I think just related to that instability, I think the other big challenge that we might be experiencing is, I guess, how important these global communities of practice to us are and how disrupted they might become over the coming years of climate instability and the likes, seeing how those networks and those coalitions might be disrupted and set back this work, if we don't find better ways to also seed that work locally. And I know that's sort of a big part of a lot of what people are trying to do. So I'm going to stop talking because I'm going all over the place.
Welcome, Fabienne, to the fishbowl.
Yeah, I guess the word that struck me, and that was the word abolitionist in a different context completely. Because the work that the organization, which I am the managing director, does is specifically around anti-oppression. And like I said in the introductions, that looking at supporting leadership from BIPOC and LGBTQ communities to reflect on their leadership. I was attracted to this work specifically because I had been in a system that I considered was very broken, which is international development work, and which had a hard reckoning, both because of COVID. All of a sudden we were grounded. We literally were grounded. So you're not getting on a plane. All the borders are closed, and we had to work differently. And also because right after that, there was the George Floyd, where this reckoning was supposed to happen. So coming to this particular organization felt there was something about it that called me at that moment. That's what the work that I do in the organization is. The work where I center myself is I do anti-racism work, and I am a feminist. And by today's standard, maybe 30 years ago, I wouldn't have called myself this, but I realized by today's standards, I'm considered radical feminist, which is so strange because 30 years ago, I wouldn't be considered a radical feminist, but that's in what feminism have come to mean in that sense of it. But recently, I realized this is something that I've always kind of felt. Abolitionist, by which I mean the movement which calls for eradicating incarceration, institutional incarceration. That movement is something that I've always felt very strongly about. And just recently, I think it was really provoked because of the passing of hooks internally in me. When I first read Bell Hooks and Angela Davis and these women, I was just starting to have children. I'd had children, they were on the border of the work I did, drew in, didn't read. And then when Bell Hook passed, I felt the need to go back to that. And specifically to the work of Angela Davis, which has always inspired me about how strong and committed she was to the abolitionist movement. And that's the system that I really feel a strong commitment to, so much so that I decided to use my allocation for professional development to reading a bunch of books. I decided that's what I was going to do in the next few months. And I said it publicly, so I'm going to have to read at least 2 of them. Yeah, and where I find the system change world is sometimes overlaps with what interests me and how I see the world and how those theories kind of presented, and sometimes feels so different, so outside of that work. And yeah, that's where the limitations are for me, because sometimes it just clicks and it's okay, this is exactly what system change is. Angela Davis was saying something the other day, and somebody asked her, well, what would we do with people if we don't have prisons? And she said, that's the wrong question. The question is, what systems have to change and have to adapt so we don't need prisons, you know? And then at that moment, that particular moment, system changes made sense to me. It was just a moment of clarity for me. Okay, that's why it makes sense. That's what system change is ultimately. Yeah. So that's the limits of it, but at the same time, when the clarity comes, it's healthcare. It is system change. It's huge, but it can be reduced sometimes in moments of pure clarity. Yeah.
Yeah, I really love that, Fabian. You know, like can you hear me okay now? Okay. I wonder if Angela Davis considers herself a systems change practitioner. I wonder if like Grace Lee Boggs is like, yeah, systems change, that's what I do, right? And so I think, you know, given what has been shared, I'm also thinking about like the limitation of imagination, right? I find myself, given that, you know, I'm involved in, you know, in educational equity, educational justice work, and helping to shift, you know, that system. Also have done a lot of youth development work, you know, have done a lot of emergent strategy movement work, and kind of going into these spaces where people are really thinking about what does a future look like where Black people are thriving, where trans folks are thriving, right? Where like folks that right now are labeled as marginalized, non-dominant, etc., are thriving, and then I find myself in these like the systems change field, you know, where folks are coming in with really great frameworks and great theories and good ideas, and I'm wondering like, where's the dissonance here, right? Because you are in your work on gender justice and your work on, you know, on reproductive justice and your work on educational equity, etc. There's a system that you're shifting. There's methodology, there's framework, you know, and also I wonder about like the imagination of the field as a whole, right? In that I find myself kind of looking for or looking ways to enhance, to deepen, to enrich my own, what I call, you know, my knowledge network, right? And I haven't necessarily found too much, you know, a lot of folks that are like, yeah, I'm a systems change practitioner, and, you know, here's my analysis, and here are my politics around certain things, right? It's kind of like either you're doing movement work, right, and doing or racial justice or, you know, blank justice work, or you're doing systems change. And it's like what boundaries were created there that kind of created that kind of schism, or what boundaries exist there that make it so that they don't feel adjacent, right? Like it's there's something that feels right now, it feels non-permeable, right? Really hard to kind of like get through if you're coming from one place to the other, right? And so as someone that's kind of like moving across these sectors, I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? That thing that you're doing right now is systems change, right? And so what's made it that you don't identify that way, or that you don't find the need, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to name that, right, given the great things that were mentioned here. I'm also thinking about, right, given some of the time that we have, and clearly we could keep on talking here for 2 hours, I feel. Tatiana mentioned this theme about the call to deepen the practice, right? And I think that's where we might offer something, you know, before this session closes, around deepening the classes, deepening the practice, right? There's a huge demand for this systems change thing, right? And there's also still the same mindset around turnaround time, around how you report it, how you measure it, etc., right? And so I'd love to hear from y'all where where do we need to add more value? What are the practices that we really need to be integrating into our practice?
I'm going to jump in because I nudged everyone last time, if that's all right. I feel like I could reel off a bunch of different things, but I feel like the common thread for me across the last 10 or 15 years, and a drum that I feel like I keep beating, is the need for our practice to go deeper on relationship building, and how we do that relational work. It's my experience with LifeHack, which was a kind of youth wellbeing initiative in New Zealand, was that whenever we paid attention to deepening relationships, deepening trust, deepening how we know each other and how we shift how we are together, all of the other things that we wanted, the collaboration, the what we build together, the coalitions, all of the enabling conditions for the systems change to happen, that was all improved by paying deeper attention to the relational work early on. And so for me, we're really only just scratching at the surface with a lot of these programs of, you mentioned the speed that things happen and the regular reporting and all of that sort of stuff. That relational work is so often the stuff that happens in the coffee breaks and not the stuff that's given, real deep, important time and recognized as a vital part of the work that we're doing. And I think COVID has made that even harder and even more shelved behind all of the other things, because we're lucky that we're able to connect on Zoom, but there is nothing like being together and shifting who we are together in person. So I think that's my thoughts.
To jump in or to add, I agree with what Sam shared. I think, speaking to what you named, Lou, around this disconnect, the seeming disconnect between, I think, movement world and system change. I think for me, one that feels different, I think is needed in system change, is a shift from mind to heart, or from mind to body. I think oftentimes we engage around systems changes. Do you know the right language, the literature, the frameworks, the mental models, right? It is talked about as a cognitive framing rather than an embodied way of being. And I find that in movement spaces, there is much more attunement to our bodies, to how things feel, right? And so I think, for one, there's a need to just shift that frame. And I think that goes hand in hand with, at the individual level, system change actors really doing more of that deeply personal work around power and privilege and race and gender, et cetera, right? Ability. Because I think at the individual level, folks just haven't engaged around that work, right? They aren't necessarily bringing a deep equity analysis or self to systems analysis around their own role within that. And I think ultimately what ends up happening is a reproduction of harmful systems, or a lack of sustainability, or silos, or competition, where we end up inhabiting the systems we're trying to change, or replicating those, because again, folks haven't done that internal work as leaders in this. And so I think at the individual level, it's really folks pausing to ask themselves, well, where is that discomfort coming up for me, to engage in these type of conversations, right? And I think a movement away from this sense of we're all the human race, right? This idea that, we're all in it, rather than kind of naming the ways in which, right, systems of oppression and power continually at play. So I think that really resonates for me. And then again, decentering whiteness in how we think about our institutions, right? So moving from singular leadership models to shared and distributed leadership, to models that really speak to our interconnectedness, to what it means to be in right relationship with nature, for example, like Sam was naming. I draw heavily on emergent strategy as a frame within systems change work, and I think of it as a living systems approach, right? And so how can we borrow from, I think, frameworks that maybe aren't traditionally in the canon, but I think do the same type of work or offer us different frameworks to engage further around the work. And so I think looking to, again, leaders of color who are already doing this, or maybe not calling it systems change. And then I think like just this going back to this idea of abolition, and a quote that I always think of from Ruth Wilson Gilmore, who says abolition is about presence, not absence, right? It's about building life-affirming institutions. And so I think for me, I'm very clear that the systems responsible for our oppression are not going to be the same systems that are responsible for our liberation or for justice. And so that being said, really moving systems change and how we think about it from less of a focus on identifying dysfunctional systems, and again, more to new possibilities, right? What does this afford us to create, to live into that doesn't exist now? And I think that is where the imagination piece is really valuable, that I find missing. But really, I think this idea of freedom dreaming or critical imagination can be really valuable to systems change as a way to help us tap into that heart piece that I was naming, right? So I think not only is the way to address social problems, but to really think about, again, new beginnings, new possibilities outside of what already exists. So I would say really leaning into those pieces for me feel important at this juncture.
I'd like to offer a breath to the conversation that we've been in right now, right? For some time. And I'm looking at the time. I think we're 6 minutes to the closing of this session, right? And this is one of the few times that I'm like, man, this could have gone longer. I would have stayed for a longer Zoom session. I usually don't do that. But in this space of luminaries, of brilliant folks, I'm definitely feeling that. So I do want to offer like a quick pause, maybe a 30-second pause before I pass it over to Marisela, right? Given the things that we've spoken about, thank you again, Tatiana, for laying out those themes, right? And having us really consider how power is at play, given the limits, the boundaries, the limitations that we're feeling in the way that we're able to work and the ways that we're not able to work, or who we're able to work with, and how we're looking to transform, I would say how we're really helping to support the field and its evolution, and what are some of those ways, and hearing that there is something about centering the heart, that there is something about centering our connectedness, not just to each other, but to the world at large, to Sam, had kind of introduced the term. What was the term? Was it it's like ecological, right? And I'm thinking now about like the change that's happening for us. And so I guess the thing that I'm also wanting for folks to consider, and I'm definitely going to have this spill over into our following session tomorrow, is what is it that we're learning about ourselves personally, right? About our work in the field and about the field itself. Given that we are the field, right? And we're working to shift the way that the field works. And so that's going to be a question that I'm going to kind of keep coming back to and wanting to engage with, on these platforms, but also away from these platforms, right? So again, just wanted to share that, and thanks so much, folks, for participating in that delicious fishbowl.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you all. And it is an honor to be moving us towards close today, but this is not the end because wait, there's more tomorrow. So if you would like to attend, there's another solstice soiree, another conversation happening tomorrow. And that is, I'll drop our events page in the chat. That's happening at 12 to 1:30 p.m. EST. There is that for you. If you're interested in taking a look, you can also see past events that went on before, including links to like past clubhouses and things like that. So if you want to keep learning, that's also a good way to get back to our main webpage. So final reminders and announcements. If you aren't already, we do have a newsletter that would be awesome to have you subscribe to, if you can, so you can stay tuned to more things coming up, including announcements about luminaries and their digital offerings, what's coming out of Bridging, Learning, Weaving, other events and resources that we're going to be highlighting. And also, if not already, we do have a Mighty Networks platform, which is our virtual engagement community that we are continuing to develop. So if you want to join in there, there's a link to hop in that I just dropped in the chat as well. And that's still growing and coming into itself. But if you want to join now, you'll be there as it continues to do so with us. All right, so gratitude. I think I was told that I get to close with the Queen Bee. So if you want to bring her on in here, Lou, we're going to celebrate together this time, our energy that we've shared together today and that we're going to continue to send out to each other and to the world. So if you feel like moving your body, you can turn off your camera, or you don't have to, but you can shake it off, do a little dance, whatever feels good. And we will see you hopefully again very soon. If not see in connection. Thank you all so much. Happy solstice.
Thanks, everyone.
Happy solstice.